I wanted to save this a quick conversation on Russia and Ukraine until the end, because I think as we look at what's happening in the world, and Russia and Ukraine is just one example of it, it stands in stark contrast to what we've got going on here in Utah. And you think about everything we just covered, right? The import, this really difficult topic, and now we have leaders on all sides of the issue coming together to find solutions. We think about the alliance, right? A global supply chain crisis. And again, in the Utah way, everybody rallying around to come up with innovative solutions to a really challenging issue. And you think about Anne Marie and everything that the Salt Lake Chamber and Women's Business Center is doing to help address a really important issue, not just here in Utah, but across the nation and around the world. And we're doing it as Team Utah. We're all rallying together to figure out how to tackle some of these really difficult challenges. And that stands in such sharp contrast to what we see what Putin is doing in Russia. And so right now, the world is focused on Ukraine, and it's heartbreaking to think about the Ukrainian people. And I know Thomas has a lot of friends in Ukraine. Many of us do. I lived for 2 years as a missionary in Russia. And so thinking a lot about, friends in Russia and what it means for the Russian people. There's gonna be a lot of death and destruction, which is heartbreaking and tragic, but it's really important for us as an organization, a state, and a nation to remember that this is what happens in the world today is not isolated to one country or one region. Right, last summer, we saw an absolute debacle in Afghanistan, where we displayed as a nation a complete lack of competence. And I remember at the time talking to Boyd Matheson on the radio and saying, Boyd, this is heartbreaking for the people of Afghanistan. But what terrifies me is think what this means for Ukraine and what this means for Taiwan. Vladimir Putin has wanted to take over Ukraine. This has been infatuation of him for many, many years. And it's no accident that he's acting now at a time where he perceived the window of opportunity where the United States and our partners and allies were both distracted and also displayed a lot of incompetence last summer. What we're seeing now is important for Europe and Ukraine. But I can guarantee you that President Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party are watching very, very closely. Whereas Putin has been obfuscating his desire to exert control over Ukraine and not very overt about it for years. CCP in China, their overt policy objectives is to make Taiwan a part of China. And so what this means is we're looking at a crisis in Europe, but it's grave, and it's a complete affront to the rules-based international system that's existed since really the end of World War II. And so as we debate as a nation what we do about it, it's really important to remember that this is more important than Ukraine. It's more important than Russia. But we have in Vladimir Putin somebody who is demonstrated an absolute brazen disregard for the truth, for the rules of the international system. And this action is very destabilizing for not only Europe, but for the rest of the world. And it's made me, a lot of us have talked a lot over the past couple of years about this really significant increase of two twin threats, as I think about it, both nationalism and tribalism. So nationalism is not patriotism. It's not, I believe in my country, I want to advance my interests. Nationalism, the nationalism that fueled a lot of, 2 world wars in the last century, is this belief that I am going to advance the interests of my country and my people at the cost of others and pursue all means to do so. And clearly very destabilizing. And we're seeing that increase. We've seen over the past few years, and we're seeing it in sharp focus now in Ukraine. At the same time, though, and this is unique, we've had a rapid increase in tribalism. Right? We see that in our own nation, and we see the fighting and the divisiveness that exists in our own nation. And those two combined are really dangerous, because not only do you have with tribalism, our systems becoming very brittle, our ability to pull together a cohesive national strategy becoming much more difficult. And then at the same time, you have dictators and aggressors around the world, fueled by nationalism, taking advantage of these moments of weakness. And that leads to a pretty scary situation. And what that means is undoubtedly in the years and decades to come, we are going to see more war, more conflict around the world than what we've seen over the past 75 or 80 years. And you see a mega trend happening that will be in place over the next generation or so, which is a pretty bleak assessment, right? I didn't want to start the meeting on a downer, so I led with supply chains. right? Something to get people excited. But again, you see that, and yet we contrast all of the collaboration that we've been talking about, the Utah way. And what I think is important for us as an organization, it's important for us certainly as a state, and then all the companies and institutions that are part of this organization, to remember that the work that we do matters. Right now, none of us can go and change the outcome of what Vladimir Putin decides to do. Nobody can change in this room what happens in Ukraine. We have national leaders, and we should advocate and support for smart policy, smart engagement in those areas. But as a state, as an organization, as companies, what we can choose to do is to rise above the pettiness, rise above the divisiveness that has beset our country. And again, the inland port is a prime example of this, and find ways to work together. And as we do that, that is going to increase our competitive advantage as a state and our companies here in the state. And over time, that's going to make sure that we as a state and as an organization, as the companies, are having a leavening effect on the nation and the rest of the world. And many of you have heard me say that it's one thing that's very motivating for me here at World Trade Center Utah is this belief that we truly are working to make Utah the crossroads of the world. And we're not doing it just for the sake of Utah, but we're doing it because we believe that Utah is going to have this leavening effect all around us. And this one way for us to make our candlestick a little bit taller, the light just a little bit brighter. And so through our global engagement, we can try to make the world a little bit of a better place. Another great example of that is after Afghanistan, right? We held a town hall right here in this room where we had Utah's Afghan community come, and there was a lot of anger and frustration. We had people who arrived from Afghanistan, from the airport straight to this room, and their families were stuck in Afghanistan trying to figure out what to do. And so this community and the World Trade Center Utah board and working with our partners rallied together, and we raised $1.4 million of cash and in-kind contributions, the vast majority of that coming from World Trade Center Utah board members, in order to make Utah the most welcoming place in the nation for Afghan refugees. And we are certainly doing that. And we will continue to plug in behind the scenes to support our partners to help them do that. But we will continue to have opportunities as a state, as companies, as an organization, to have a positive impact on the world. And so as we're watching what's happening out there in Russia and Ukraine, let's always just think about what we can do within our spheres of influence. And as an organization, we are remained absolutely committed to doing everything we can to identify problems, to convene people who can work on those problems, to innovate, to find ways to solve those problems. And as we do so, I am optimistic that we're going to continue to prosper and excel here in the state of Utah, and that through these global connections, we are going to be able to have a positive impact on the rest of the world. But none of this could be possible without your support and your active engagement. So whether it's working with the Women's Business Center, whether it's working with Brian and the Alliance, whether it's working with all of our other public partners, we need your engagement. We need your continued support so that we can have the team in place, and it's an incredible team, to be able to go out there and to help our companies compete and win around the world, and to do everything we possibly can to fulfill this vision of making Utah the crossroads of the world.